Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. You know whose situation is a little bit more murky coming out of Saturday? It's the Alabama Crimson Tide. And so we just talked about the Alabama or the Oklahoma perspective on this game. If you're watching this clip later, there's a separate clip talking Oklahoma. Let's go ahead and talk Alabama for half a second, because it's not the end of the world, but it's certainly not the result you wanted. But now it puts you in a very precarious situation, right? Because all I'll say, coming into Saturday, everything was on the table. And guess what? Coming out of Saturday, everything is on the table as well, but the stakes have certainly changed, okay? And so what I want to do is talk about this game, break it down. And the one thing I will do, by the way, because, I always try to monitor what fans are saying after the game and this and that. I am not going to do the Kalen Deboer's in over his head and Kalen. No. Listen, it's a new era. It's a new world. Now, to be clear, I have been critical of Kalen Deboer in the past. Go back to some of the stuff I said about Kalen Deboer after the Florida State game. It wasn't pretty. But that was a different circumstance, a different moment in time where he was coming off of a fourth loss to an unranked opponent. And I did wonder at the time. I said, is this guy in over his head? Well, he's responded. They have the great win at Georgia, win over Tennessee at home, win over Vandy at home. This guy is a great coach. He knows what he's doing. He's the right fit for Alabama. So this isn't going to be a Nick Saban would, there's some of that stuff on social media. That's not what this is going to be. But what I will say, I do think it is indisputable that Oklahoma exposed some issues for Alabama. And now Alabama, all of a sudden, 10 games into the season, when they thought they were cruising to Atlanta for the SEC championship game, cruising to the college football playoff, all of a sudden, everything has changed instantaneously. And what I think this game proved to me is kind of some of the stuff that we've talked about over the last couple weeks. If you listen to Thursday's show, I mentioned it kind of in the Oklahoma part of this segment, is I did talk about the possibility that I could see the upset in this game. Listen, I love the Kalen Deboer Alabama story, but I think we also have to acknowledge this team has not been playing very good football over the last couple weeks. Go back to last week. 20-6 was the final score against LSU. It was a game where it felt like Alabama had no juice on offense. That's not a knock. It's just a reality. It doesn't mean Ty Simpson's a bad person. Ryan Grubb's a bad play caller. It just means there was no juice. It just so happened that LSU's offense is so inept, it did not end up mattering. And so I bring it up. They didn't play well against LSU. They got outgained against Tennessee the week before that. It was 2 weeks before there was a bye in between. And even the second half of Missouri, that game, they were up big and Missouri rallied and made it an interesting game. And so it's almost like you have to go back to Vandy first week, second week of October for the last complete game that Alabama has played. So they have not been playing well. Oklahoma, in my opinion, was basically the worst possible team you could play at the worst possible time, because the things they do well were going to expose the things that are issues. And now those things that were sort of issues, but you kind of sit there and say, well, we're figuring it out. We're going to patchwork it together. No. Y'all got issues, and we got to figure out if you can get them fixed in time to salvage this season. Because listen, I'm not saying it's, national championship or bust or whatever, but you were in position as of Saturday to make the college football playoff. You still are, but there's no guarantee. As far as what's wrong, I think the biggest thing, it's something we've been talking about, frankly, since the Florida State game, and it hasn't really changed. They can't run the football. It's crazy. I was looking this up. Alabama coming out of Saturday, so these stats are officially of Sunday. They are 120th nationally in rushing. There's only 133 teams, so that ain't good. Who they're actually the only team in the SEC that runs the ball worse than Alabama is LSU. They are actually ranked, Alabama, one spot behind North Carolina in rush offense. So we've spent the whole season making fun of Bill Belichick. That place is a train wreck. By technical definition, they're running the football better than Alabama. Now, listen, I'm not smart enough to know what's wrong. I'm not an O-line expert. If you want the X's and O's, I'm sure my buddy Cole Kublick, Jeff Schwartz, somebody can break it down better than I can. I don't know what's wrong. I just know this has been an issue, frankly, dating back to Nick Saban's last year. This has been a 3-4 year issue. And I don't know if it's the players they recruited, the scheme they're trying to run. They really haven't had a run game for like the last 3 seasons. Now, statistically, they weren't as bad because in previous years they had Jalen Milroe, and Jalen Milroe covered up some stuff. But it doesn't change the fact that they have not been able to run the football at all. And this has been a pressing issue that they've been able to survive to this point in the season. I would also add this. Listen, 2-3 weeks ago, you can find it. I was the biggest Ty Simpson advocate there was. Love Ty Simpson, Heisman Trophy. I'd take him number 1 overall in the NFL draft. Well, I do think what we see with Ty Simpson, and it's not a knock on him because it's no different than any other quarterback, when he doesn't have a run game, it puts all the pressure on him, and he looks kind of pretty pedestrian, right? Not a knock on him. It's just a reality. I said the same thing about Arch. You can't blame Arch for the loss on Saturday to Georgia because Arch had no run game at all. Well, the same is true with Ty Simpson, but the counter to that is that Ty Simpson, he's just not physically gifted enough to elevate his team when other things are going wrong. There are quarterbacks in college football that can do it. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. Maybe Fernando Mendoza is the answer. There aren't many. Maybe it's Julian saying he obviously hasn't been tested much this season. But there are guys, like I think when Bryce Underwood clicks, he'll be able to elevate everyone around him when things aren't going well. The problem is Ty Simpson is not that guy. And so all of a sudden, when you take away the run game, all of a sudden Ty Simpson kind of looks like what he is, a fringe 5-star, not a ton of physical tools, and all of a sudden too much is on his plate. Well, you saw it Saturday, 28 of 42. Yes, statistically he played very well, but if you actually look at, some of the throws, some of the misses, and his inability to actually get stuff done down the field, it was pretty jarring. And by the way, those numbers statistically much better than he was against LSU, and frankly, much better than he was against Tennessee a few weeks ago. But 28 of 42, a couple misses. I thought it was interesting after the game. Kalen Deboer was somewhat critical of him. Said, quote, Matt, I found this quote after, so, I didn't send it to you. But after the game, Kalen Deboer basically said about Ty Simpson, he said something to the effect of, let me find the exact quote. He said, yeah, it was the pressure they brought. He's got to be okay with throwing it away. You can only hold on to the ball for so long and feel like with the blitz they had, you're going to get overwhelmed and outnumbered. So even Kalen DeBoer's like, dude, you got to get rid of the football. And so they don't have a run game. The quarterback play isn't good. By the way, the kicking game has been inconsistent. Talty, the kicker, missed a field goal early on that obviously in some ways ended up being the difference in the game. And so you look at Alabama, listen, it's a glasses half empty, glasses half full thing. I think the glass is half empty. They've had issues for about 4 or 5 weeks now, maybe the whole year, and it feels like they finally got exposed. The counter to that is that everything is still ahead, but all of a sudden that Iron Bowl has some very different stakes. Okay, so for people who maybe can't piece it all together, and I'm not being sarcastic when I say it, I'm just saying, if you haven't looked at the brackets or you don't know the playoff scenarios, here's what you need to know. Alabama coming into Saturday, if they had won that game, they technically wouldn't have clinched a spot in the SEC championship game, but they would have clinched a spot unofficially in the college football playoff. If you're 9-1 and you only have one SEC game left, Alabama next week plays against Alabama next week in week 13, plays against Eastern Illinois, home of Tony Romo and Sean Payton. So they're going to beat Eastern Illinois. You win that game on Saturday, you've basically unofficially clinched a college football playoff spot. Auburn game, you want to win. It's a rivalry, but it doesn't really matter. Well, now all of a sudden, you lose that game against Auburn. You're not going to the SEC championship game. And if you're 9-3, I don't know if you're going to the college football playoff. Some of those wins haven't held up very well. I'm talking about specifically, Missouri hasn't held up that well. Tennessee is fine. Georgia's a great win just like it is last year. But if all of a sudden Oklahoma has 2 losses and they have the head-to-head win against you, if A&M is undefeated or with 1 loss, or undefeated or with 1 loss, if Ole Miss is sitting at 11-1, Georgia, there's just going to be a lot of teams ahead of you. So Alabama fans don't need me to tell you, there's a lot at stake. And I think more importantly, I think that Oklahoma game exposed some big things. The question is, can Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb use that Eastern Illinois game to get right? And when I say get right for Auburn going into the Plains on Thanksgiving weekend. that game all of a sudden has much different stakes. It feels like a win and you're in the college football playoff. Lose and might be a sweat straight through Selection Sunday.